For our wedding anniversary, Ethan took me to the roof of an unfinished building, where he tied me up and sat across from me. Slowly, he played a video, showing my father kneeling and bowing to him repeatedly on my behalf. The anger I felt made my vision blur with rage, but Ethan kicked me and sneered, "Does it hurt to see your father like that?" But how does that compare to even a fraction of the pain I felt when I lost Eliza? The sharp pain caused me to double over, nearly fainting, as I had no strength to scream. Ethan had already ruined my voice by pouring boiling oil over me. Every breath I took felt like torture, which only delighted him further. He grabbed my chin, his eyes burning with red-hot hatred, and snarled, "Evelyn, how could you be so despicable? Despicable enough to orchestrate the bullying that killed my Eliza? Why wasn't it you who died instead?" His voice suddenly rose into a roar, filled with the fury of a wild animal. "Eliza! Eliza!" Desperately, I tried to recall a face to match that name. Eventually, I remembered someone, young, full of life, and unrestrained. Then, I realized Ethan not only deeply loved Eliza, but also believed I was responsible for the bullying that had taken place. Ethan and I had grown up together, childhood friends who were always close. In our senior year of high school, we both managed to get into the advanced class, preparing for our final year to reach our dream universities. I had a good shot at my goal, possibly even getting into Tsinghua or Peking University, and with my help, Ethan could easily get into a top school if he could keep up for that last year. But then Eliza transferred to our school. She was strikingly beautiful, with pale skin and a slim figure, and when she smiled, her eyes curved in a captivating way. She had modified her school uniform to show off her body, and soon, nearly every boy, including Ethan, was drawn to her. His parents were strict, never allowing him to stray off course. But Eliza, with her passionate and rebellious nature, became irresistible to him, a rose blooming wildly inside the rigid walls of his upbringing. At the time, I still had feelings for Ethan, and seeing him pulled toward Eliza was unbearable. I tried repeatedly to stop them from interacting, which made Eliza despise me. One day, she cornered me in a secluded stairwell and sneered, "Just wait, Evelyn. Ethan will be mine." I had no idea how far she was willing to go. She concocted a plan to stage a bullying incident involving her and Ethan, aiming to frame me and break us apart. It was childish and thoughtless, but both Ethan and I fell for it. I managed to save Ethan, but Eliza wasn't as lucky. She died in that alley because the thugs she'd hired didn't know when to stop. Remembering all this, Ethan shut his eyes, as if to block out the sorrow. "Evelyn, you cost Eliza her life," he muttered, his voice filled with anguish. I looked into his still furious eyes and shook my head fiercely, trying to convey that I had nothing to do with it. But Ethan bent down and pressed a lit cigarette into my face, smiling cruelly. "Your father's already waiting for you down below," he said. His words sent a chill through my entire body, and tears poured down my cheeks as if my heart were being torn apart by a blade. "You killed Eliza, and this is exactly what you deserve. If it weren't for your scheme, she wouldn't have died, and Ethan and I wouldn't have been torn apart," he continued, his voice suddenly calm yet filled with a deep, imperceptible sorrow. Half kneeling on the ground, I stared at him, my tears running into my mouth, tasting bitter. The situation was both tragic and absurd. I laughed at Ethan for falling for a manipulative woman who wanted to destroy him, and at myself for being so blind and bringing all this suffering to my family. Ignoring the pain, I gritted my teeth and dragged myself up by the windowsill. Once I was close enough, I lunged at Ethan and bit his ear. Furious, he kicked me in the foot, sending me stumbling backward. As I staggered, my body suddenly fell off the edge of the building. In my dazed state, I caught a glimpse of Ethan's cold smile. "This is your punishment, Evelyn," he said, "and if there's a next life, I'll fix all of this and never let Eliza go again. As for you, go reunite with your father." The sensation of all my bones shattering and my organs being pierced brought unbearable pain. The weightless fall made me take a deep breath, and, after a bout of dizziness, my vision cleared. I saw Ethan at 18 pinned to the ground, bruised and helpless, while Eliza knelt beside him, crying softly. In my daze, I stood at the alley's entrance, watching for a while. Sensing my gaze, Ethan turned his head with difficulty and looked at me, his eyes full of hope and pleading. "Evelyn, save me," he called out, his voice dry like a cracked lake. It was the same scene as in my previous life, and I clenched my fists, realizing I had somehow returned to 10 years ago. The terror of falling off the building and the suffocating pain gripped me, but seeing Ethan's desperate plea this time only made me feel contempt. Ethan, this time, I won't interfere with your disgusting love story. You deserve to rot in this alley, I thought, turning away from him and walking back toward the school. This time he could suffer all that Eliza had in store for him. The next morning, during self-study, I was called into the teacher's office. As I entered the classroom, I saw Ethan standing by the desk, his eyes downcast, while his mother stood beside him, livid. The teacher greeted me and began to speak, but before he could get far, Ethan's mother stormed over and slapped me hard across the face. "Evelyn, I'm so disappointed in you," she shouted, raising her hand to hit me again, but the teacher quickly intervened. My face burned and my head buzzed from the blow, but I coldly looked up at Ethan's mother, who was fuming from a distance. "Evelyn, how could you do something so cruel? Look at what your people did to Ethan," she accused, her voice filled with venom. I turned to Ethan, who had been glaring at me the entire time, and smirked inwardly. It seemed he hadn't explained anything about how he got hurt while protecting Eliza. Without hesitation, I pulled out my phone. "Ethan, if you were assaulted, why didn't you report it to the police?" I asked, making the room fall silent. Ethan's gaze sharpened, and I could see the panic in his eyes. He didn't want his mother to find out about Eliza. Knowing her controlling nature, he feared she would punish him severely if she discovered he had a romantic relationship. "Don't call the police," Ethan suddenly blurted out. I chuckled quietly. "Auntie, there's always a consequence for doing something wrong." When I left the police station, my father hurried over. I thought I could hide my emotions well in this new life, but the moment I saw him, I broke down. Seeing me in tears, my father got so furious he nearly hit Ethan right there at the entrance. I stopped him, but the look in his eyes showed how much he hurt for me. "Sweetheart, does your face hurt?" he asked, his eyes red with concern, before glaring at Ethan's mother, who was cowering like a scared bird, and angrily said, "How dare you hit my daughter? Just wait. When I get back, I'll cancel all business dealings with your family." Ethan quickly moved in front of his mother and, looking serious, said, "Uncle, please calm down. My mother wasn't thinking straight. She was just worried about me. Besides, Evelyn was the one who first had people come after me. My mom just felt bad for me." Ethan then turned to me, showing the bruises on his arm and sighing deeply. "Evelyn, look at how badly I've been hurt. Dad, please calm down." Ethan glanced at my father and added, "I know you acted impulsively because you like me a lot, but Eliza and I are just classmates. I was asked by our teacher to help her with schoolwork, so I spend a bit more time with her. Even if you're jealous, you shouldn't have sent people to attack us." With just a few sentences, he painted me as a spoiled, reckless girl. I resisted the urge to slap him, raised an eyebrow, and gave him a meaningful look. "Who said I like you? There's a limit to your arrogance." Ethan was caught off guard. "What did you say?" But soon he regained his composure, thinking I was just saying it out of anger. He smiled helplessly, shaking his head. "Don't be silly, Evelyn. You've always liked me, and we're engaged." My expression turned cold, and I interrupted, "Sorry, Ethan. I think we should call off the engagement." As soon as I said it, he stared at me in disbelief, his eyes wide. He stepped closer and tightly grabbed my arms. "Evelyn, what's gotten into you? I've told you, she and I are just friends." I slowly smiled, pulled my hands away, pressed them on his wound, and pushed hard. Ethan turned pale with pain as I smiled wider. "Listen closely, Ethan. I don't like you, and I won't marry you. I didn't send those people after you, but I suggest you ask Eliza yourself. Tell her that if she tries to tarnish my name again, I won't hesitate to visit her with a lawyer." I looked him up and down, my voice dripping with disdain. "As for you, spend the rest of your life guarding your foolish love until it rots away." After that drama ended, I stayed home for 3 days at my father's request. During that time, Ethan kept trying to reach me. When I ignored his calls, he contacted my father. After being rejected again, he began standing outside my home every day, like a statue for 3 straight days. On the third evening, a light rain started to fall, and Ethan was still standing there, getting drenched but refusing to move. Feeling frustrated, I finally put on some clothes and went downstairs. When he saw me, his face lit up, and he smiled. "Evelyn, you finally came to see me." I dodged his hand as he tried to grab mine and said flatly, "Ethan, No matter what you do, this engagement is over. His voice trembled as he asked, Evelyn, have you fallen for someone else? His hands hung by his sides, fists clenched, as if he had been wronged. Seeing him like this, I felt the urge to laugh. He was always like this, wanting what others had while keeping what was already his. It was obvious he liked Eliza, yet he still wanted me to be at his beck and call. Ethan, the person you like is Eliza, I told him firmly. You should follow your heart. Ethan fell silent for a long time, then finally spoke. Evelyn, can I really follow my heart? His face showed confusion. I knew he was torn. On one hand, he felt pressured by his family to hold on to me for their business. On the other hand, the idea of following his heart was too appealing to ignore. He had always longed for freedom. You only have one youth, I warned him. Figure out what you truly want. If you love someone, don't let them slip away, or you'll regret it for the rest of your life. After all, in our previous lives, being with Eliza was what he had always dreamed of. In the end, Ethan made his choice. He followed his heart and got together with Eliza. But even then, he disgusted me. He messaged me saying, even if I'm in a relationship, you'll always be the most important princess in my heart. I scoffed and blocked him on everything. The news of Ethan and Eliza getting together caused a big stir, mainly because Ethan skipped the art college entrance exam for her. It was rumored that when the exam ended, Ethan's parents dragged him to the exam site looking disheveled, but it was too late. The guards wouldn't let them in. Realizing there was no turning back, Ethan's parents were pale with shock. But Ethan just shrugged, saying, Relax, Mom and Dad. Skipping one exam won't ruin my life. There are plenty of paths to success. His father's face turned bright red in anger, and his mother cried, Ethan, do you even know what you're doing? You're throwing away your future. Ethan avoided his mother's gaze, muttering, But I really love Eliza. I don't want a long-distance relationship. That statement almost made his father lose it completely. He started tearing at Ethan's clothes, yelling, You know nothing about love. You're throwing away your future for a girl. What are you thinking? The scene they caused at the school gates was a spectacle, and just thinking about it made me want to laugh. My deskmate leaned over, gossiping. You're not still hung up on Ethan, right? I tapped her head with my pen and replied firmly, Don't worry. From now on, I won't care about whether he lives or dies. That night, Ethan's mother, looking disheveled and exhausted, knocked on our door. The moment she saw me, she grabbed my hand, pleading, Evelyn, you and Ethan have known each other since childhood. He listens to you. Please, Auntie's begging you, talk some sense into him. Don't let him ruin his future like this. I almost couldn't contain my laughter. In my past life, out of love for him, I poured all my energy into securing his future. Thanks to my efforts, Ethan achieved significant accolades, and by the end, not only did he realize his childhood dream of becoming a renowned music prodigy, but with the backing of Evelyn's family, he rose to the rank of a highly influential general manager. However, before he killed me, he kept repeating, What's the point of all this without Eliza? His eyes were filled with hatred as he said, Evelyn, I despise you. Every second spent with you is revolting. While he tormented me, Ethan's mother watched coldly. But now, she held my hand and pleaded, Evelyn, you are the one who fits with Ethan. You're the daughter-in-law our family recognizes. Please talk to him. Tired of hearing such absurdities, I gently pulled my hand away and replied, Auntie, I don't have feelings for Ethan anymore. She looked at me stunned, as though refusing to accept the truth. That can't be. When you were little, you said you wanted to marry him. I smiled slightly and responded, That was when I was a child. Seeing that I was resolute, Ethan's mother left, dazed. From that point on, I devoted myself entirely to preparing for the college entrance exam. But during this critical time, Ethan made a huge mistake. Eliza mentioned that she craved strawberries picked by someone she liked. So, in the middle of the night, Ethan sped across multiple towns and districts to buy the finest ones for her. On his way back, he had a car accident and ended up in the hospital. Karma, I thought. Given that we had been neighbors for more than a decade, my father, soft-hearted as always, took me to visit him, bringing fruit baskets. When Ethan woke up, he was first stunned and then sneered at us. Oh, you're both still alive? My father's expression darkened, shocked by how much Ethan had changed. Ethan's parents quickly restrained him and urged him to apologize, but he kept smirking. Why should I apologize? This is all your fault, Evelyn. It became clear to me that Ethan had also come back to this life. His eyes were filled with disdain and bitterness as he spat out, "Consider yourself lucky this time. Eliza is fine. Otherwise," I held my father back, looked Ethan directly in the eyes, and said firmly, "I wish you and Eliza a long, happy life together, filled with many children." Ethan's grin widened. "Oh, we will." As we were leaving the hospital, we bumped into Eliza, who had come to see Ethan. She purposely blocked my path, a look of contempt on her face. "Why are you still pestering my boyfriend, Evelyn? It's pathetic. He doesn't even like you. You're just a bookworm who only knows how to study." Eliza, a fan of youth melodrama novels, always used the idea of youth as an excuse. She looked up at me, her eyes gleaming with triumph. "No matter what you do, Ethan will always love me." I'd known since my previous life that Eliza harbored hatred for me. I was academically successful, came from a wealthy family, and was attractive, while Eliza, despite her beauty, lacked other assets. What really gnawed at her was her need for financial aid, and she couldn't wait to see me fall from grace. Without any power to hurt me directly, she targeted Ethan, hoping to use him to climb the social ladder while tearing me down emotionally. Sadly, Ethan was completely unaware of her true intentions. Too tired to entertain her, I simply stared at her and asked, "Did I really hire people to attack you too?" A flash of guilt crossed Eliza's face, but she quickly regained her composure. "Of course," she replied. I looked at her and smiled. The deeper my smile, the more anxious she appeared. However, I wasn't ready to expose her just yet. I wanted Ethan to be the one to peel back the layers of his beloved, to see firsthand how revolting she truly was. Only then could the pain truly hit home. As the midterm exams passed and the college entrance exams approached, Ethan and Eliza's relationship began to crumble. Their meetings turned into screaming matches, and their bond unraveled like threads. Ethan, in his own misguided way, tried to make up for his mistakes, but I had no interest in his repentance. I was focused on my dream university and the future ahead of me. Soon, the college entrance exams arrived, and they went incredibly well. For the first time, I felt confident in every subject in question. I knew I would make it into Tsinghua University or Peking University. As expected, with a score of 726, I became the top scorer in the city. Even though I had been given a second chance at life, I couldn't contain my excitement. In my previous life, I had the potential to get into those top universities as well, but I wasted so much time and energy on Ethan that I missed the opportunity. I sacrificed my future to help him, only to end up lowering myself. Now, I had reclaimed the position that was rightfully mine, and I couldn't help but feel overjoyed. Passing by Ethan's house one day, I overheard his father yelling angrily, smashing furniture. "You ungrateful son. 320 points? What a disgrace." His mother was crying, lamenting, "You could have gone to Tsinghua or Peking University too, but that wretched girl ruined you." Ethan, however, defended Eliza with gritted teeth. "I love her. As long as I'm with her, I'll never regret it." His parents were on the verge of collapse, their house filled with shouts and sobbing. I just smiled to myself. Everyone has their own fate. Not long after, Ethan's family business started to crumble, and their financial chain broke. Without my family's help, they were forced to declare bankruptcy, and all their assets were seized and auctioned off. On the day of our graduation party, Ethan appeared, but he was a shadow of his former self, pale, with dark circles under his eyes and a haunted look. He clung to me desperately, his voice filled with paranoia. "Evelyn, why are you still so heartless?" I frowned, surprised by his audacity. He gritted his teeth and accused me, "In our past life, you caused the bullying that killed Eliza and tore us apart. Now, you're crushing my family again. You're truly vile." He grew more agitated, nearly shouting, "Why don't you help my family? We supported you, and this is what we get in return, our downfall and death of loved ones." I clenched my fists, holding back the anger rising inside me, and responded, "Why should I?" I accepted his suggestion without much thought, but I never anticipated that this decision would lead me straight into misery. Reflecting on my father's tragic passing, the bitterness inside me was nearly impossible to control. Why on earth should I save you? Why should I assist your family? What are they and what is Eliza but parasites who feed off me? Ethan didn't expect me to respond this way, and his face flushed with anger. He opened his mouth several times, trying to speak, but Eliza quickly interrupted. She clung tightly to Ethan's arm, urging him, "Ethan, don't be impulsive." Then, turning toward me, she became instantly tearful. "Evelyn, please help Ethan. If you do, I'm willing to break up with him," she said, looking at me with just the right touch of vulnerability. "We won't blame you anymore for those people you had found to hurt us." Her words caused an uproar among our classmates. They looked at us in disbelief, clearly enjoying the drama. Those who usually disliked me eagerly joined in to make the situation worse, condemning me for my actions. Eliza gained more courage, wiping away her tears. "Evelyn, I'll do anything if you're willing to help Ethan." Ethan immediately stepped in, protectively holding her and glaring at me. "Evelyn, are you still not sorry?" he asked. I rolled my eyes silently and stared at Eliza. "Let me ask you one last time. Are you sure those people were sent by me?" Eliza flinched, unable to meet my gaze, tugging gently at Ethan's sleeve, pulling him down. "Ethan, let's just forget about this," she said softly. In Ethan's mind, this was because of my cruelty that had left a mark on his beloved. He glared at me, his hands trembling with rage. "Evelyn, I'm not afraid to call the police and end this with you," he threatened. I turned my attention back to Eliza, who was no longer able to maintain her act. Her face turned deathly pale as she looked at Ethan. "I said to let it go. Why can't you just listen?" She panicked, her eyes filling with tears, and hurried toward the door. Ethan, thinking she was frightened by me, pulled her back into his arms. "Don't be afraid, Eliza. I'll protect you," he reassured her. Before anything else could happen, a few classmates, eager to get involved, were about to call the police for us. In a burst of emotion, Eliza rushed forward and snatched the phone away. At this age, emotions are fragile, and the mere mention of the police seemed to unravel Eliza completely. She broke into loud sobs, pleading with Ethan. "Ethan, I said we wouldn't pursue this anymore." I ignored her sobbing and turned my focus to Ethan. "Are you too scared to follow through?" His throat tightened, his voice shaking. "Why won't you let me call the police?" It was a simple question, yet Eliza crumbled under the pressure. She covered her face, sobbing uncontrollably. "Ethan, it was me. I planned everything. I wanted to win you over, and this whole mess was my idea." The words hit Ethan like a thunderclap. He staggered back, his face pale and his lips trembled as the truth came crashing down. The room was silent, everyone stunned by the sudden revelation. Ethan, clearly shaken, looked up at me with eyes full of regret, but I simply felt sadness. Such a foolish and childish scheme had ruined me so terribly. It was both tragic and absurd. I stared at him, emotionless, and asked softly, "Is this the love you were willing to destroy my entire family for?" Ethan's face turned ashen and his eyes filled with tears as he lowered his head. "Evelyn, did it hurt back then?" The breath caught in my throat. Did it hurt? Watching my family kneel helpless, before dying miserably while I was betrayed and killed by the one I loved? The suffocating pain surged back again. How could it not hurt? I took a deep breath, then raised my hand and slapped him hard. "This is what you've longed for. Make sure it lasts forever." I thought the connection between Ethan and me had ended there, but in just 2 weeks, he came to me, looking entirely defeated. It was as though life had lost all meaning for him. His eyes were hollow, with dark circles beneath them, showing a total collapse. Without regard for the public setting, he fell to his knees in front of me, tears streaming down his face. "Evelyn, I was wrong. I truly know I was wrong." I couldn't help but laugh bitterly and asked him, "Exactly what were you wrong about?" His eyes, filled with grief and anger, spilled his bitterness. "Eliza left me because I had nothing, Evelyn. I was wrong to distrust you and treat you the way I did. I know now how much I've hurt you in the past. Could you please give me another chance? You were the only one who ever truly cared for me." He sobbed loudly. "Please don't leave me. I can't live without you." His words, so desperate, should have been music to my ears in my past life. But now all I felt was disgust. "Do you know what I'm most thankful for?" I asked calmly. "It's that fortunately I stayed away from you in this life. Look at me. I'm doing incredibly well without you." Ethan, unable to accept this, began slapping himself, shouting, "I'm sorry, Evelyn. Please come back. I can't live without you." His actions were becoming erratic, and I quickly stepped back to avoid him, knowing that any more involvement would only bring misfortune. After that, I received numerous calls from unknown numbers, which I knew were from Ethan. I didn't pick up. My father, on the other hand, was furious about the whole situation, so he decided to go abroad. It wasn't long before I heard news about Ethan. In our class group chat, I learned that he had been arrested for killing Eliza. The pieces fell into place as I read through the gossip. After I rejected him, Ethan returned to confront Eliza, blaming her for his downfall. He had found out that Eliza was planning to leave him for another man, which led to a violent outburst that resulted in her death. In the police footage, Ethan was holding a knife, kneeling, muttering to himself, "Honey, I'm sorry. I've avenged you." The news was met with disbelief in the group. "Has Ethan gone mad? Who is he avenging?" they asked, shocked that such a passionate love had turned into mutual disdain. Looking back, their relationship had begun with deception. To Ethan, Eliza was a flower in the mud, something he longed for, but could never truly have. He had fallen for the illusion she created, and for a time, he couldn't let go of that feeling. But after being reborn, Ethan viewed everything with a sense of superiority. Unable to accept that the flower he had once cherished was now tainted. Finally, driven by anger and humiliation, Ethan set off on a path of no return. His father died from a stroke upon hearing about his son's fate, and his mother, driven mad by grief, fell to her death from a great height. It was eerily similar to how I had died in my past life. Ethan was sentenced to life imprisonment for his crimes. When my father and I returned to China, we received a call from the police. Ethan, now imprisoned, requested to see me. He wanted to watch me suffer. I agreed to meet him. Through a glass window, he stared at me intently. "Evelyn," he said softly, "I've only just realized how good you were to me. You always tried to save me, but I—" His voice broke and tears filled his eyes. "We were childhood sweethearts. We should have never been apart." After seeing Eliza's true nature, Ethan finally realized that I was the one he should have loved all along. I was blinded by youthful desires, and I deserved this end. I felt completely unshaken. Ethan then broke into tears, desperately seeking my response. "Evelyn, if there's another life, will you forgive me?" His entire buildup led to that final sentence. I interrupted him sharply. "No, and there won't be a next life. You deserve exactly this fate." Ethan paused, his tear-streaked face making him appear utterly foolish. I started regretting it. This was supposed to be a time for enjoying the warmth of the sun in my garden, listening to music and sipping fine wine. Coming here to endure this nonsense was simply inviting misfortune. Smiling at Ethan, I said, "See, I was right when I said you would spend your life guarding this absurd love, wasting away until your death." As I walked out of the prison, the weight on my heart lifted. The red sun was shining brightly, casting golden ripples. My new life had begun. In my past life, I had suffered abuse from my husband. Despite calling the police and asking for a divorce numerous times, it was all in vain, and my husband grew more violent. I managed to save enough money to escape that hell with my daughter, but she betrayed me. She secretly contacted my husband, which led him to steal my money. She stood by, coldly watching him beat me to death, and stopped me from calling the police. "Didn't Dad just hit you a few times, Mom? You're being melodramatic. Couldn't you just live a good life with him?" In this new life, I watched as my daughter, now the victim of my ex-husband's violent tendencies, was scolded and beaten by his family who favored sons over daughters. This time, I wondered if she'd still play the melodrama card. When I woke up again, I was lying in a hospital bed, my daughter standing beside me with a disgusted look on her face. "Mom, why did you call the police for no reason? Now Dad's in the detention center. He's already so tired from work. Why are you making such a big deal out of this?" She pointed at me and scolded me, leaving me stunned, dizzy, and confused. In my previous life, I had endured my husband's abuse, constantly asking for a divorce. Yet my daughter, desperately wanting a complete family, resisted. My husband, knowing that, threatened me by saying if I divorced him, he would take our daughter and make life difficult for us. To protect her, I had to wait, saving money quietly through part-time jobs to escape with her. But my daughter, instead of following my advice, secretly informed my husband of my plans. He took away my phone when I tried to call the police, and again, he beat me to death. At my funeral, my daughter shed fake tears then signed a letter excusing my husband. Dad didn't mean it, she said. If she hadn't always wanted to run away, Dad wouldn't have had to hit her. I was furious. The one person I had tried so hard to protect was betraying me. I slapped her and screamed, Isabella, do you realize that your father almost killed me? I'm your mother. Whose side are you on? Despite still lying in the hospital, she only excused the man who hurt me. I was devastated. Isabella stared at me in anger. No wonder Dad hit you, she said. You're just a shrew, not like Aunt Juliet. This shocked me. Aunt Juliet? I asked. In my past life, I knew that my husband had betrayed me. Being involved with a female colleague, I had no evidence and my daughter coerced me into staying. But now, she seemed to know about my husband's affair. She affectionately called the other woman Aunt Juliet. My daughter had been complicit in my husband's betrayal all along, stopping me from divorcing him. My heart turned cold. Mom, don't think too much about it, she said. Dad's just having a fling. He'll come back to us. Dad works so hard, and you're just a housewife. He needed to make some friends outside. Don't be jealous. As if that wasn't enough, she pulled out a letter of understanding from her bag, asking me to sign it. Dad just accidentally touched you, Mom. Don't overreact. I stared at her coldly. Accidentally? If it weren't for our neighbor, I might have died. Let your father stay in the detention center a little longer to reflect on his actions. I pressed the bell, requesting rest, and had the nurse escort my daughter out. She stamped her feet in frustration. Mom, you're so stubborn. You're being melodramatic. If you keep this up, Dad will divorce you. Who will take care of you then? I closed my eyes, too exhausted to argue. The most important thing now was to clear my mind and never be manipulated again. If you think I'm melodramatic, I thought, then let my daughter experience the favoritism for sons in the William family and see if she can still be the carefree Miss Isabella she was when I supported her. Later, I began the process of transferring to another hospital. My daughter's calls flooded my phone, and I blocked her. Despite the William family's wealth, they kept their distance from me. I had saved enough money by working part-time, determined not to be tied down by my daughter's influence again. I reapplied for a new ID and bank card. My daughter tried to soften her approach, begging me to sign the letter of understanding. But when she learned I had already left the hospital, she became furious. I rented a small house, kept my address private, and invested my savings in stocks, making my money grow. Eventually, I married William after becoming a well-known investor. But when I was pregnant with my daughter, I suffered severe morning sickness. William coaxed me into resigning from my job, claiming he would support me. Being an orphan, I longed for love, and I believed his sweet words. He became successful with the money I had saved, and he brought his parents from the countryside, insisting I serve them. My father-in-law was a chauvinist, and my mother-in-law was cruel. They made my life miserable. William ignored it all, and when I complained, he hit me. It's good enough that you're Mrs. William. My parents raised me, and you should be more obedient to them. The abuse escalated. If I was doing something as simple as laundry or cleaning, William would drag me into the study and beat me. The last straw came when my daughter stood between us, demanding that I stay for the sake of family. William threatened me that if I divorced him, our daughter would belong to him. I was afraid for her safety, so I endured the humiliation. But what I never expected was that my daughter would be the one to betray me. She only cared about her father. How many times had I shielded her with my own body from my husband's blows? And yet, she only blamed me for angering him. My daughter, whom I loved more than anything, had become the sharpest weapon, used to hurt me in this life. After 3 months of running away from home, I finally earned my first significant amount of money, a 6-figure deposit that boosted my confidence. I removed the phone numbers of William's family from the blacklist. Not long after, my daughter called me, crying out for help. Mom, where are you? Please come back and save me. Her voice was desperate on the other end of the line. I raised an eyebrow, asking, Do you need me to call the police? There was a brief silence before she urgently pleaded, No, Mom, please come back quickly. Grandpa and Grandma are making life impossible for me. They make me cook and do laundry every day without allowing Aunt to help, and they won't let me leave the house. Dad and Grandma hit me every day. If you don't come, they'll beat me to death. In my previous life, I would have rushed back to protect my daughter, but now I only smiled. Isabella, what are you doing? Your father works so hard every day. What's wrong with him hitting you a few times? Why are you making such a fuss? Isn't it just that he was upset and touched you a little? Surely your grandma wouldn't hit you for no reason. Do you really have to make it this dramatic? I tossed her previous words back at her one by one. My daughter was left speechless, her voice becoming angry. Mom, I'm your only daughter. How can you say this? You didn't used to be like this. I kept smiling as I replied, Mom has finally seen things clearly. If you think it's okay for your father to hit you, then just endure it. After all, I went through the same thing, and you advised me the same way, didn't you? Her tone rose in anger. How can you be the same as me? She was realizing that there is no real empathy in the world. Now that the pain was on her, she didn't like it. I narrowed my eyes slightly, thinking, what she was enduring now was only a fraction of the suffering I had to go through. I thought, she can't even bear this. There's more to come. Isabella, what you just said really hurts me. I pretended to be upset. Realizing her mistake, she quickly added, Mom, I didn't mean it like that. I just miss you so much. Where are you? I can't stand being without you at home. I really can't live without you. Naturally, I didn't give her my address. Good daughter, Mom is doing fine. I just need to separate from your father and calm down. Stay at home and relax. When I've made up my mind, I'll come back. I wondered if she truly missed me. It was clear that without me, William's family was venting their anger on her. Now she wanted me back to take the abuse she was enduring. Mom, I can't stay here for another minute. Can you come pick me up? She made her plea. I smiled coldly and replied, I'm a little busy right now. How about I rent you a small house outside? But if I do that, your father and grandma will surely cut off your living expenses. Things won't be so comfortable for you. My daughter wasn't pleased. Mom, I just want to see you. Are you coming out or not? I'm your only daughter. Don't you care about me anymore? My eyes turned cold as I gave her an address. Fine, I'll meet you. And she quickly hung up. The next morning, from a cafe, I saw my daughter not far from the window. There were purple-blue bruises on her neck, and her mouth was swollen. William, my mother-in-law, and others were standing outside. I could hear my daughter's voice in my ear again. Mom, when are you coming? I've been waiting for you so long. I glanced coldly at her. Isabella, are you sure you didn't tell your father and grandma about this? If they catch me, I'll suffer. She pouted. Mom, don't you trust me? I would never tell Dad or Grandma. As she finished speaking, she winked at my husband outside the window. I knew at that moment that she wasn't just missing me, but was betraying me. I ended the call and turned to the woman behind me. She was of similar build to me, fully covered, and resembled me about 80%. When she entered the cafe, my mother-in-law and husband immediately focused on her. My daughter called out to her, and the woman turned to approach. Just as my husband and mother-in-law rushed to grab her, trying to hit her, her hat fell off, revealing that she wasn't me at all. The woman immediately sat on the floor, crying for help. Help, they're hitting me, they want to kill me. My husband and mother-in-law were shocked and panicked. No, this isn't who we wanted to hit, they stammered. The coffee shop was public, and the surveillance cameras had clearly recorded everything. The manager quickly called the police. The woman I had hired to blackmail them began pestering them, and in the end, my husband and mother-in-law had to pay her 100,000 wen to settle the matter. Once they did, they turned on my daughter and beat her up again. You little fool! Didn't you say Arya would come? What happened? You made us look like fools. My mother-in-law twisted my daughter's arm, and my husband kicked her. You're useless. You can't even find out where your mother is. I had secretly installed wiretapping software on my daughter's phone long ago. Watching her face the consequences of her actions made me happy. After being beaten, my daughter immediately called me to question what happened. I acted surprised, saying, I had something to do today, so I couldn't come. What's wrong, Isabella? It's just a small issue. We can meet another time. No big deal. My daughter was silent, seething with anger. She started cursing at me nonstop, but I pretended to be sad. Isabella, you seem to be upset. I'll hang up now. I'll talk to you later if something's wrong. Couldn't she even endure this? I would never forgive anyone who harmed me in my past life. After earning my first pot of gold, I focused entirely on investments. I even opened a personal financial management account and started a blog teaching others how to make money. I quickly gained fans after successfully predicting stock movements. My career flourished, and when I heard about my husband's affair with Juliet, I took action. I gathered people to decorate the entrance of Juliet's villa, with lanterns, streamers, and drums. I loudly announced, "Everyone, come see. Our master has been in love with Miss Juliet for a long time, and now she's pregnant with his child. As the legal wife, I'm here to introduce a concubine for my husband. Come on, Miss Juliet, let's go to the William family." The bodyguards held banners and a loudspeaker playing my voice on a loop. The people around whispered, understanding the situation immediately. "So, she's a mistress. I thought she was a respectable woman, but she's just a rich family's mistress." Juliet's reputation was destroyed, and she was furious, stomping her feet. Soon, the security guards came to remove my people, but I was prepared. I pulled out my marriage certificate and property investment documents. If it hadn't been for my daughter's hesitation in the past life, I would have already divorced him. I wouldn't have dragged things out only to eventually be betrayed and murdered by my ungrateful daughter. This house was bought by my husband, and as his legal wife, I have a right to half of it according to the law, since it's considered community property in our marriage. There's nothing wrong with me doing something in my own home, right? I stopped hiding and directly confronted them. The head of security glanced at the notarized documents and the marriage certificate, clearly uncomfortable. In theory, there was no issue, as resolving family disputes isn't something officials typically handle. The security guards remained quiet, and I kept promoting my cause, calling a locksmith. The locksmith quickly understood the situation, saw the money in my hand, and agreed to pick the lock. "Arya, what are you trying to do?" Juliet demanded, now that I was trying to pick the lock. She didn't hide her intentions any longer and opened the door. Her mother arrived to support her, shouting, "This house is in Juliet's name. What do you think you're doing? You're breaking into private property. Be careful or I'll take legal action." I quickly responded, "This house was fully paid for by William and is still part of our marital assets. I have a right to half of it. If you don't want to sue me, I'll sue you." I gave the order to my bodyguards to charge in, and I lay on the couch, glaring coldly at the mistress. "You're a mistress, and everything William spent on you belongs to the community property. That means I have a share. The clothes you're wearing, everything, partly belongs to me. You have the nerve to act like this. Don't even think about running away." Juliet's face twisted in anger, and her mother lunged to slap me. "How dare you come to my house and make trouble? You couldn't keep your man, and now you blame other women. No wonder William doesn't like you and finds someone else." I responded by slapping the middle-aged woman hard across the face. "What's it like to pimp for your own daughter? You're truly shameless." Juliet's mother, who had once been a mistress to a Hong Kong tycoon, immediately collapsed to the ground, wailing, "Help! This woman broke into a private home and is trying to kill us." A crowd gathered, intrigued by the commotion. I saw the opportunity to make the situation worse for this disgraceful mother-daughter duo. So I grabbed the loudspeaker. "Everyone, look at this. This is a pair of exceptional mistresses. They've been pestering my husband for money and won't let go. The mistress is even secretly pregnant and trying to force me out. I offered her the position of a concubine, but she insists on staying a mistress. Come and see their faces. This woman was once a mistress to a Hong Kong tycoon. Don't miss it." Juliet and her mother quickly covered their faces in embarrassment, and Juliet's mother stopped shouting. I continued, "If you don't believe me, just check. I'm recording this." "Arya, I'm warning you, don't push me too far," Juliet shouted as she tried to grab my phone. I slapped her across the face before responding. "Better call him quickly and let's see if he can deal with my bodyguards. Otherwise, does he want to return to the detention center?" Juliet, fuming, dialed the police. I was calm. "Call them if you want. I just want you out of this villa. Don't forget, this is community property. And as for the bastard in your belly, it will forever be an illegitimate child, just like you." With red eyes, Juliet glared at me. "Arya, I won't let this go." The bodyguards held them both down as I gave her another slap. "I won't let you go either. In my previous life, most of the times my husband beat me, it was because of Juliet." Did she think I hadn't seen the messages on his phone? I looked at Juliet coldly. "Youth has no price, and slaps are for teaching you respect." Juliet's cheek quickly swelled up, and she pleaded with me. "What if you call the police? I'll just end up compensating you for emotional distress," I sneered. "If you send me to the detention center, I'll make sure to reclaim every penny William spent on you and for this villa under the community property clause." Panicked, Juliet said, "This is all mine. Why should I pay you back?" I raised an eyebrow at her, intrigued. "You finished college, but you don't know the law." She started to get flustered. She knew exactly what was happening. Moments later, before the police arrived, William's Mercedes-Benz appeared. He stormed in, furious. "Arya, what do you think you're doing?" He tried to hit me, but my bodyguards blocked him. His assistant tried to restrain him, and a fight broke out between our men. Taking advantage of the chaos, I kicked William several times. "Arya, how dare you disturb Juliet?" William shouted. "Hey, when we get home, you'll pay for this." Juliet, trying to smooth things over, added, "Brother William, she didn't mean it. Don't beat her like last time, please. She was just upset, and our son is fine." Hearing this, William turned even angrier, clutching his waist where I had kicked him. "Arya, kneel and apologize to Juliet right now, and explain yourself to the people outside, or I'll do worse." Unfazed, I took out a divorce agreement from my bag and threw it in his face. "Sign it now, or I'll be the one who's rude." Juliet's eyes sparkled, eager for me to leave William so she could take my place. William's face turned pale. "What do you mean by this?" I raised an eyebrow. Can't you see what I'm saying?" Just as he was about to snap, Juliet quickly interjected. "William, didn't you want to divorce her for a while? Now that she's offered it, it's better for both of us. For our son's sake. Don't you want him to be born legitimate?" I crossed my arms, eyes cold. "Fine, if you won't sign, you can wait for the news tomorrow about the president of William Group being detained for domestic violence and having a pregnant mistress. Don't miss it." I turned to leave, and William tried to grab my arm, but my bodyguards blocked him. He was furious. "If you do this, I won't let you see our daughter again," he threatened. "Hey, I'll be tough on her, and you won't get custody." I turned and kicked him again, sending him to the floor. "Our daughter likes you, her father, right? You can fight for custody if you want, but don't think you can take a cent of my money. I'm entitled to half of everything you've gained." Over the years, William had gotten rich using my savings, yet he hadn't shared a single cent with me, all while keeping a mistress and buying her a villa. His behavior was despicable, and I would take what he valued most. If that ungrateful daughter wanted to be close to her father, let her. She'd better not interfere with me. William, shocked, pointed at me in fury. "If you don't believe me, just wait for my divorce lawsuit." I left with my bodyguards, leaving the villa in chaos. After this incident, Juliet's reputation in the neighborhood was shattered, and she couldn't even go outside without being ridiculed. As soon as I left the villa, I received a call from my daughter. "Mom, come home and save me quickly. I was nearly beaten to death by Grandma," and my daughter screamed in distress. As a good mother, how could I just stand there and let this happen? Without hesitation, I dialed the police and emergency services. "Isabella, don't worry. I've already sent the phone recording to the authorities, and they'll be here to rescue you soon." My daughter cried out, "Mom, how could you call the police? Cancel it now. I'm fine. You can come save me yourself." I knew that going there alone would be like walking straight into danger, especially with all the bodyguards around. Naturally, I decided to take them with me, eager to see what they were up to. When I opened the door, I saw my father-in-law and mother-in-law waiting. My daughter was kneeling on the floor, her face swollen, looking like a pig's head. "You want to divorce my son, and yet you still want his money, and to cause trouble at Juliet's place. Juliet is carrying the Arl family's legacy." My mother-in-law began cursing me. "If it weren't for these bodyguards behind you, I would have slapped you already." I coldly looked at my sharp-tongued mother-in-law. "Your son betrayed the family and was violent with me. Yet you think he's the victim. If I hadn't considered us family before, I would have already been done with all of you." My father-in-law exploded. "You're useless. You can't satisfy your husband, and you blame him for having an affair? You couldn't even give him a son, but there are plenty of women who can." I burst into laughter. "So, this is why you, father-in-law, have been sneaking around with Aunt Lily all this time. You even ended up in bed together. Oh, Aunt Lily has a son, and she's not even 45. You're so lucky, father-in-law." My mother-in-law's eyes widened in disbelief. "Don't you know, mother-in-law? Father-in-law and Aunt Lily had a minor operation in the hospital recently, and they almost gave William a little brother or sister." I pretended to be surprised. "Like you're talking nonsense." My father-in-law tried to cover my mouth, but the bodyguards stopped him. I immediately played a recording on my phone for everyone to hear. "Father of William, when are you going to end things with that woman at home? You can't leave me without a proper status." Aunt Lily's voice was heard saying, "I've decided on you for life, but I'm afraid of the wife at home. If it weren't for that, I would have kept our child. After hearing this, my mother-in-law lashed out at my father-in-law. I've given you children and taken care of everything all my life, and this is how you treat me? She scratched his face fiercely, and he responded by hitting and scolding her. You act like a shrew all the time. No wonder I had to look elsewhere. The fight escalated, and my father-in-law got kicked and beaten as my mother-in-law continued her assault. Then, just as I was enjoying this chaos, a voice called from outside. A father of William, what's going on in there? And there she was, his mistress, Lily. You shameless woman. I thought of you as a sister. As soon as my mother-in-law saw her, she released my father-in-law and rushed to attack Lily. The house was in complete disarray as my daughter trembled in fear. I calmly watched the scene unfold. The fight continued until my husband arrived. My mother-in-law, crying and sniffling, said, Son, you have to stand up for me. Your father's been seeing another woman and almost had another child with her. My husband shot an angry look at Lily. Dad, you didn't tell me about this. You promised not to cause trouble outside. My father-in-law admitted his guilt. I just told her to have the operation as soon as possible. I didn't expect her to get pregnant. My mother-in-law was in shock. You knew about your father's affair, son? My husband responded impatiently. Dad just wanted some fun on the side, Mom. Don't make such a fuss. What's the point of making a scene? Hearing this, my mother-in-law was even more devastated, unable to believe that her own son and husband were betraying her. She collapsed to the floor in tears. My husband, however, turned to me. Look at the mess you've caused, Arya. Are you satisfied? Years of smoking and drinking had aged him, making his face look more menacing. What do you mean I caused a mess? I was simply telling mother-in-law the truth. Your father betrayed her. If you didn't do it, why are you so afraid of me speaking the truth? My husband clenched his fist, ready to strike, but the bodyguards blocked him. Finally, he backed down and said, I'll agree to the divorce, but you'll leave with nothing. I'll give you custody of our daughter. I don't want it, I replied. My daughter suddenly rushed over and clung to my husband's leg. Dad, how can you not want me? I don't want to live with this old woman. I'm your only daughter. Please don't let her take me away. I smiled coldly. You think you can take my money? Take the daughter if you want, but don't think you'll get a single cent of our shared property in this marriage. My daughter was stunned, her eyes wide as she turned to her father, then back to me. Mom, I don't believe it, she whispered. I simply glanced at her. Don't you love your father most? Since I'm not fighting for custody, isn't it best for you to stay with him? My daughter was speechless. My husband scolded me angrily. How can you be so heartless as a mother, giving up your daughter for money? I responded coolly, same to you. In my past life, I was beaten to death by my husband because I cared too much about that ungrateful daughter. In this life, I've seen through it all. I respect other people's destinies and have let go of the impulse to help others. You have 1 week to decide. If you don't sign the divorce agreement willingly, I have no problem going to court, and I'm fine with everyone in the capital knowing how you betrayed your family and resorted to domestic violence. I'm truly curious to see how much the William Group's stock will drop as a result. Your many competitors must be thrilled to see this unfold. I grinned and then turned away, leaving with my bodyguards, leaving behind one last message. Don't even think about transferring assets, because I have plenty of ways to ruin your reputation. In the end, I have nothing left to lose now. My husband, shaking with rage, could only stand there, yelling at me. The following day, my daughter showed up to beg me. Somehow, she had found my address and knelt down in front of me. Mom, please come back home. Dad didn't mean it. He knows he was wrong. Please, don't divorce him. He loves you so much. If you divorce him over misunderstandings, he will suffer for the rest of his life. A cold smile spread across my face. It seemed the William family had sent my daughter as a negotiator. So he doesn't want to divorce me that much, I said. But it's a pity that Aunt Juliet is already expecting your little brother. I heard that Aunt Juliet went to Hong Kong for a checkup, and it's confirmed it's a boy. So William doesn't even care about his own son. My daughter stood up suddenly. What? Juliet's pregnant? Her face twisted with anger. This child cannot be born, or it will definitely fight me for the inheritance. Mom, you have to help me. I had no interest in helping them, but couldn't wait for the chaos to escalate, preferably to the point of them destroying each other. Instead of worrying about whether I'll divorce your dad, you should focus on the child in Aunt Juliet's belly. I've heard that before the child is even born, your grandparents are already planning to leave everything to their grandson. Furious, my daughter stormed off to the William family's house to demand answers. But when she arrived, she was severely beaten by the family. You're just a useless girl. You'll be cast aside once you're married. How dare you want your future brother's money? My mother-in-law slapped her, venting all her anger at me on my daughter. All the family property will go to your brother. I'm being generous enough not to ask you to give him anything. From the side, Aunt Juliet added fuel to the fire. Mom and Dad will soon be a family. And as for Isabella, I'm sure she's learned from Arya. She's so vain. I'm not worried about anything else, but I'm afraid she'll do something to the baby in my belly. My in-laws immediately kept a close watch on my daughter, punishing her again. If anything happens to this baby, I'll kill you, my mother-in-law warned harshly. My daughter, full of resentment, was exhausted by working nonstop, enduring abuse from her husband and in-laws. Her hands were calloused, her face pale, and her hair unkempt, a stark contrast to her life before as Miss Isabella. If her younger brother was born, she would get nothing from the family, and she could never live like this. Determined not to give up the family inheritance, my daughter told me to stop the divorce, ordered me to return home and do chores for her grandparents. I immediately blocked her phone number. Now, my daughter was the one being mistreated by the William family. She had become both fragile and manipulative. A week passed, and my husband still hadn't signed the divorce agreement. So, I posted the video of my husband's affair, along with the recording and the WeChat messages between him and his mistress, online. I paid a few top bloggers to repost it and add comments. Before long, it became a trending topic. Although the faces in the video were blurred, the title, "Famous Entrepreneur Betrays Family and Abuses Wife, Mistress Tries to Force Wife Out," grabbed attention. A few bystanders even uploaded clearer videos of my husband and the mistress, making it clear this was a major scandal involving the William Group. The William Group's competitors didn't miss the chance to exploit the situation, spending heavily to push the story further. The news blew up, and my husband and his mistress were ridiculed. All rich men are the same. They abandon their wives once they get rich. William is truly shameless. I heard he relied on his wife's family wealth when starting his business. Such a person deserves to go bankrupt. I'll never buy their products again. I know this mistress. She lives near me. I saw everything. Even her mother was a mistress. It's a pity for the original wife. She was blind to marry such a scoundrel. The William Group's reputation was tarnished, and its stock price dropped significantly. My husband, frantic, called me. "Arya, you've caused a huge uproar. What exactly do you want? Does the drop in the stock price benefit you?" I laughed softly. I have nothing to gain. The rise of the stock price won't benefit me either. But if you want the stock to keep falling, I'll keep pushing. He nearly had a heart attack in his rage. I heard Aunt Juliet's voice in the background and raised my eyebrows. If you don't sign that divorce agreement soon, I have even bigger surprises in store. Maybe tomorrow you'll see an explicit video of William and his mistress Juliet on some small website. That would be quite a spectacle. I smiled slightly. My husband clutched his chest, yelling, "How do you have these things? Didn't your true love send them to me?" I calmly replied, sipping my coffee. Juliet was guilty back then. To push me out, she exposed herself and sent me dozens of intimate photos of her and my husband. What I posted online now is just the beginning. I heard a few slaps and Juliet's screams on the phone. I didn't think of this at the time. "I didn't do it on purpose," Juliet begged. I wasn't interested in their conversation and hung up. A week later, just before I took the next step, I got a call from my husband. "I've signed the divorce agreement. I'll have my assistant bring it to you. We'll meet at the Civil Affairs Bureau the day after tomorrow. But you must delete those videos, or don't blame me for being ruthless." I smiled. "That works for me. After I get everything I deserve in the divorce, we'll part ways. I'll finally be free from this hypocritical, heartless man." I couldn't be happier. I received the divorce papers and let out a relieved breath. The next day at the Civil Affairs Bureau, my husband still wasn't ready to give up. He brought along our daughter, his parents, and the entire family. My mother-in-law immediately began insulting me, calling me shameless. She accused me of being lazy and not earning a dime, yet wanting to take a large sum of money from her son after our divorce. When they saw the group of bodyguards behind me, my husband and mother-in-law realized they couldn't act up and could only express their frustration through words. I smirked and asked, "Don't you both know who's to blame for this divorce? You rose to power on my money, betrayed me, and even had a mistress and an illegitimate child. What kind of man are you, William? Are we getting divorced or not? If not, let's take it to court. I'll show the world your true face." The William Group's reputation was already tarnished, and its stock price had dropped significantly. It had only just managed to conduct some damage control, and if another scandal broke, the company could be finished. William couldn't afford that, so he glared at me in anger. Juliet, unwilling to see me walk away with so much, spoke up. "Sister, you still have a chance to change your mind. If you leave without a single cent, we'll grant you custody of your daughter since she's your only biological child." As she spoke, Juliet kicked my daughter's leg, causing her to fall to her knees in front of me. My daughter glared at Juliet before looking at me and saying, "Mom, give all the money to Dad. I really want to stay with you." I noticed the disdain in my daughter's eyes, her messy hair and pale face revealing that she hadn't suffered enough under the William family's care. To manipulate me into giving up the money, my husband and mother-in-law had been pretending to treat her well, attempting to brainwash her. Did she really think they were being kind? She was just a fool. A cold smile appeared on my lips. "Good daughter, since you're so obedient, you'll definitely support your mother. I'm in desperate need of funds for my business now. You used to be the closest to your father, so stay with him for now." The last card played by the William family failed to move me. They weren't polite to my daughter anymore, and I was eager to watch them turn on each other. When we returned, despite their clear reluctance, they allowed us to proceed with the divorce registration for the sake of the William Group's stock price. Fortunately, the mandatory cooling-off period hadn't been enforced yet. In just over 10 minutes, William and I were officially divorced. I grabbed the divorce certificate, didn't spare a glance at that disgusting family, and quickly got into my car to leave. I used the money from the divorce to invest in starting a business, and it quickly yielded successful results. But then my daughter showed up at my door, kneeling in front of my newly purchased villa. "Mom, save me. Dad and my stepmother are almost beating me to death." I had the maid let her in. When my daughter saw me living in such a grand house, a spark of greed flashed in her eyes. I didn't miss the resentment and jealousy in her gaze. "What happened? Weren't you the one who always preferred your father?" I asked. "I'll transfer your monthly alimony to you until you're 18. Back in my previous life, with my guidance, you managed to enter university. But in this life, without me, your grades have fallen. Add in your father's abuse and your grandmother's harsh treatment, and you've started to go down a dark path on your own." Mom, take me away. I don't want to be with Dad anymore," she cried, grabbing my pants. Her arms were covered in scars, but I didn't focus on them, just as she hadn't cared about me in my previous life. I pried her hands off one by one. "That's not possible. Custody is with your father. If you want to come to me, he won't allow it," I said with a smile. This ungrateful daughter and that scumbag ex-husband of mine deserved each other. I was waiting for them to turn on each other. Hearing my words, my daughter cursed me. "Mom, how have you become so heartless? You only care about money. Aren't I your only daughter? Why don't you care about me anymore?" I sneered. "Didn't you bring all of this on yourself? You knew your father was violent and had betrayed me, yet you still refused to let me divorce him. When he was beating me, you prevented others from calling the police. When I was dying in the hospital, you only cared about getting me to sign the letter of understanding. A good daughter like you who wishes I were dead, I'd rather raise a dog. At least a dog would wag its tail at me." The daughter I had painstakingly raised had become an accomplice in my murder in her past life. She got me to sign a letter of understanding for the man who killed me. My feelings for her had been completely severed. My daughter, now furious, yelled, "You're just an old hag. So what if Dad hit you? He should have beaten you to death so you wouldn't take half of our family's money." Those words froze my heart. I slapped her hard, told the maid to throw her out, and forbade her from returning. My daughter kept shouting at the door, but I called security to have her removed. I threw myself into my work, and within less than a year, I had become very successful. Meanwhile, my ex-husband's company was struggling. The damaged reputation, poor management, and my strategic actions led it to decline rapidly. Juliet's scheme to bring in her relatives only worsened things, and soon the William Group went bankrupt. My ex-husband became a deadbeat, and his properties were seized. Juliet's dream of becoming the rich wife of a successful man was shattered. My daughter begged me for forgiveness, but I ignored her. I left for work abroad. Later, when I returned to the country, I heard news about them again. Juliet had tried to escape with my ex-husband's money but was caught by him. In a fit of rage, he brutally beat her. Not only did Juliet lose the child she was carrying, but she was also killed by domestic violence. My daughter, as an accomplice, helped conceal the crime and dispose of the body, attempting to commit insurance fraud. Juliet's mother reported the case when her daughter went missing. My ex-husband and daughter were arrested. My ex-husband was sentenced to life, and my daughter to 10 years in prison. They got what they deserved. I ignored my daughter's pleas for forgiveness and focused on opening a new business, preparing for a fresh start in life.